Caribbean Newsline is brought to you by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc.
An appeal to the region's private sector to pump money into struggling airline Liat. Our top story in Caribbean Newsline for Wednesday, June 19. From the CMC News Center in Bridgetown, I'm Ricardo Roberts. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt is calling on the regional private sector and other stakeholders to consider purchasing shares in Liat. Addressing a news conference on Tuesday night following a two-day meeting of OECS leaders, Skerritt said it was necessary for stakeholders to move beyond words regarding the survival of the Antigua-based airline. He said continued complaints about the 38-year-old airline will not solve the problems. Skerritt stressed that the airline, which employs more than 600 people and operates 491 flights weekly across 15 destinations, is vital to the continued development of the sub-region and wider CARICOM grouping.
And I also believe to that my regional colleagues, I have recognized a couple have played a part, but we need to go beyond that as well and to consolidate their participation. But it is not enough to just say, well, Liat is this, Liat is that, and therefore, and come to the table. If you're not around the table, it's going to be very difficult for you to influence the decisions. And so if you're party to negotiations, if you're party to something, then the ideas that you have, the ideas which you have, can very well find themselves turning into decisions and actions.
Guyana's President David Granger says he will not be pressured into calling elections before the country's electoral body is ready. Following the Caribbean Court of Justice's ruling on Tuesday that the no-confidence motion passed against the government last December was valid, opposition leader Barra Jagdeo said the main opposition People's Progressive Party, the PPP, would press for Guyanese to go to the polls within 2 to 3 months. But in an address to the nation shortly after the CCJ judgment was handed down, President Granger reminded that the Guyana Elections Commission, GECOM, first has to complete a house-to-house registration to compile a new voters list and therefore would not be ready for polls before November. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday morning, he said he wants credible elections as soon as possible, but he was also adamant that the house registration must be completed for that to happen.
As soon as the chairman of GECOM advises me that they are ready for elections, I will make a proclamation. Election day will be on that date. It is my duty, it's not the duty of the leader of the opposition to decide when elections will be held. I don't want a situation like we had in Nigeria, in which 2 o'clock in the morning, the election commission calls up the government and says election can't be held. GECOM has to inform me, and as soon as I get that information, I will make a proclamation.
Now, as for the CCJ's judgment that Granger's unilateral appointment of GECOM chairman retired Justice James Patterson was flawed and not in keeping with the Constitution, the president said he expected the court to explain that ruling, but he also indicated that he would seek to have discussions with the opposition leader on the matter as the CCJ suggested.
Write to him, and as soon as he is available, maybe as early as next week, I will write to him this week, inviting him to resume the consultations which are mandated under the Constitution. As far as I'm concerned, I've always operated within the ambit of the Constitution, and I have to select somebody who is fit and proper in accordance with the definition laid out in the Constitution.
Thank you,
so this is what I'm doing. I have never gone outside of the Constitution. If they felt that the process is flawed, they must let me know what the flaw is. So let us wait until the 24th of June when they make some consequential rulings, I don't, there's no way that I can see that the decisions I've taken are flawed.
Thank you,
Because it is the responsibility of the leader of the opposition to send me a list of 6 persons who are not objectionable.
The Constitution states that the GCOM chairman is to be appointed from a list of 6 persons acceptable to the president and submitted by the leader of the opposition. 3 lists with a total of 18 nominees for the post were submitted for consideration by Jagdeo, but Granger rejected them all because they did not meet his requirements and appointed Patterson in October 2017. Meantime, political scientist Peter Wickham says the CCJ ruling validating the no-confidence motion will set a precedent for all electoral bodies across the Caribbean. In an interview with CMC News, he noted that most countries across the region basically have the same requirement for an electoral body to be ready within a 3-month period for elections.
One could argue that there's a contempt of court situation, but one could also argue that it's one of these situations where better cannot be done, because you cannot have an election unless you have voters list and registration and whatnot, and they're basically saying that all of those things cannot be ready until November. I'm anxious to see how it works out. I'm also anxious to see the precedent it sets for the rest of the countries in the Caribbean.
In other news now, the Trinidad and Tobago government is taking steps to start deporting Venezuelans who are in the country illegally following last week's end of amnesty for nationals of the South American country. National Security Minister Stuart Young said on Tuesday that now the registration process is over, government is sticking to its position that those in Trinidad and Tobago illegally will be dealt with according to the law.
Beforehand, that we will be applying the laws of Trinidad and Tobago to all, after the registration process, all of the Venezuelans, and that is exactly what has been done. I spent some time yesterday evening in my office signing a number of deportation orders, and I don't want to say anything further with respect to those deportations.
Minister Young said full details of the registration process and its costs will be made public once he gets that information. Well, you're watching Caribbean Newsline now to the developments in the case of some Jamaican fishermen who are suing the United States Coast Guard for what they say was illegal detention and inhumane treatment 2 years ago. The Jamaica government has now disclosed that it granted a waiver to allow the U.S. authorities to detain the fishermen under the ship rider agreement with the United States. Now, the Foreign Affairs Ministry also said in its statement on Tuesday that there is no record of the men lodging any complaint of mistreatment with the government.
The release states that the waiver was granted based on information regarding suspicion of trafficking in contraband, the location of the vessel, the Jamaican registration of the vessel, and the nationality of the crew. Another condition of the waiver was that the fishermen's health was guaranteed. Now, the men claim they were stripped naked, chained to the decks of the U.S. Coast Guard vessels, made to lie in feces, and had their boat burned. However, the ministry says there is no record of complaint by the men since their arrest, including during their deportation last year, when they engaged directly with the staff of the Consulate General in Miami, or on their return to Jamaica. The Foreign Affairs Ministry says it also regrets that the family of the men did not contact the ministry when the men went missing. In the meantime, the ministry says it has started discussions with the U.S. Embassy in Jamaica regarding the procedures being followed by the U.S. Coast Guard to address the regional maritime security challenges.
5 fishermen had been on the boat that was intercepted and held by the U.S. Coast Guard back in September 2017. 4 of them are being represented by the American Civil Liberties Union in a lawsuit that was filed in a U.S. court last week. And coming up in Caribbean Newsline, Belize aims to become the first Caribbean country to develop a forecasting system for sargassum. The details after this. Stay with us.
Welcome to this year's 50th Caribbean Broadcast Union Assembly on the island of San Andres. San Andres is a small archipelago located in between Jamaica and Panama in the western Caribbean Sea. A lush, exotic island rich in culture, history, gastronomy, and breathtaking scenic views. Known for its beaches and 7-colored crystalline waters, the island of San Andres will be proudly hosting this year's event. CBU members will enjoy top-of-the-line accommodations for an unforgettable experience in San Andres, connecting Caribbean nations through this year's 50th edition of the CBU Assembly.
All right, so now listen. Now you're telling me about this family affair. Your mom might do it one day, but your dad is doing it also?
Yes.
Wow. So you have a lot to look up to.
I do.
All right, so listen, you seem pretty busy. I just want to know, can you just paint a picture for me? What does your day look like? When you wake up in the morning, you got to brush your teeth, you got to take your bath. What does a typical day look like for TJ Sauce Kid?
Well,
Belize is looking to become the first Caribbean country to develop a forecasting system for sargassum. Like most countries in the region, Belize continues to be plagued by the weed, which is affecting its fisheries and tourism sectors. The country's sargassum task force is working with the Ministry of Tourism and National Meteorological Service to develop a sargassum drift projection system, which it hopes will develop into a full forecasting system. Task Force member John Burgos says in the meantime they are working to clear the sargassum from tourist destinations.
We have been pushing for it to be recognized as an emergency situation in the same manner that when a hurricane comes. You know, the difference is that when a hurricane comes, you're talking about human lives. Right now, we're not talking about human lives, but we're talking about the livelihoods of the #1 industry in the country, which, as you know, comprises about over 30% of GDP. So you can't undermine that. So, and that's where we're telling government, you know what, you need to recognize how much revenues the industry brings. So you got to invest some back so that we can protect that industry. But as you can see right now, the volumes are beginning to increase a little bit larger. We have a monitoring system in place. But, you know, we're trying to see how more efficiently we're able to manage it. So
the verification process for Cayman's first people's-initiated referendum is underway, and Elections Supervisor Wesley Howell is defending the process in the face of criticism from Cruise Port Referendum CPR Cayman, which submitted the petition to trigger a vote on the territory's controversial cruise berthing project. Now, CPR Cayman has questioned the intensive exercise being conducted by the Elections Office to verify the 5,289 signatures on the petition, which was submitted last Thursday. But in an interview with Cayman 27, Howell said the Cabinet had requested a full independent verification process, and in the absence of a referendum law outlining a process to be followed, he and his team are carrying out that exercise.
I can't speak to why Cabinet would want to have the independent signatures. Again, this is sort of a historic occasion with the first time a people initiative petition has reached a 25% under the current constitution. So my office is executing the duties of carrying out that verification as expeditiously and as completely as we can do.
Now, Howell says he expects the process to be completed within 6 to 8 weeks, and he says a team is already being put together to go into the field to verify the signatures.
Persons that have worked with us before have been called. We're ramping up on training them and getting them with identifiable shirts and IDs and all the sort of logistics that would make that happen. But in the meantime, folks have been coming into our offices and we're happy to verify in person. We will work as expeditious as we can to make sure that this happens. And at the end of this, we'll provide our independent review of that list.
Well, this week in Newsline Business, the OECS looks to create more employment opportunities for the region's youth under its seasonal workers program in Toronto. And Grenada told that its planned national poultry policy will be a difficult task.
The OECS Council of Ministers for Labour is seeking to diversify the employment opportunities under the Eastern Caribbean Liaison Service. The Toronto-based ECLS targets mainly agriculture workers, but OECS Chairman Gaston Brown told the just-ended OECS Summit that there is need to provide more opportunities for the region's youth. Brown added that Antigua and Barbuda is also hoping to participate in the program for the first time.
And we believe that the participation would not only help in terms of earnings, but there would be a transfer of technology, especially within the agricultural sector. And perhaps too, it will give us eventually a larger cadre of agricultural entrepreneurs in order to develop our domestic industry in Antigua and certainly within the wider OECS sub-region. In fact,
still in Antigua, Prime Minister Brown says the OECS Director General, Didicus Jules, has been asked to prepare a paper regarding the establishment of the fourth landed campus of the University of the West Indies in St. John's. Brown says he has been notified by UWI Vice-Chancellor Sir Hilary Beckles that the university has approved Antigua as the location for the new campus. Grenada is hoping to implement a national poultry policy to meet the local demand for poultry products. But the head of one of the island's main importers says while they do support the move, it will not be an easy task.
Simply because in order for this to happen, we have to ensure that we have a reliable source of chicken. And that I know already is a challenge. So we have to have a reliable source of chicken, one. We have to ensure that we have a slaughtering house. We have to also ensure that we have the type of freezing capacity that is required.
Mary-Claire Williams, Newsline Business.
And ahead in Newsline Sport, New Zealand triumph in the ICC Cricket World Cup clash with South Africa. Stay with us. Sport is...
Welcome to this year's 50th Caribbean Broadcast Union Assembly on the island of San Andres. San Andres is a small archipelago located in between Jamaica and Panama in the Western Caribbean Sea. A lush, exotic island rich in culture, history, gastronomy, and breathtaking scenic views. Known for its beaches and 7-colored crystalline waters, the island of San Andres will be proudly hosting this year's event. CBU members will enjoy top-of-the-line accommodations for an unforgettable experience in San Andres, connecting Caribbean nations through this year's 50th edition of the CBU Assembly.
Over the years, there have been many watershed moments during the production of the Untold Stories documentary series. Interviews with convicted killers, patients with terminal cancer, a world-renowned underwater man, and a string of expose investigations. But in this episode, we interview a man who is HIV positive as he tells his life story from promiscuous teenage years to contraction of the disease.
A brilliant century from Kane Williamson guided New Zealand to a 4-wicket win over South Africa in what was a nail-biting finish. As action in the ICC Cricket World Cup continued on Wednesday, sent in at Edgbaston, Rassie van Dersen was the star batsman for the Proteas as they compiled a modest 245 for 6 after winning the toss. Fast bowler Loki Ferguson was the pick of the New Zealand bowlers, ending with figures of 3 for 59.
That's a delivery.
Well, that has been slapped through the covers. Everything in sync for Hashim Amla on this occasion. And it's help yourself stuff for Faf du Plessis. Another boundary. On him!
Good firm hit down the ground. And just takes him to 50. What a good delivery. Big spinning, left arm spinning, Mitchell Santner. Chance, and Bolt, no! That up in the air, chance this time, offside, too easy for Monroe. Great strike. Don't worry about Miller. Think of Van der Dussen.
Just like that. Lovely strike by David Miller. It's in the air and Bolt is under it. He'll take the catch. Oh yes. That is a wonderful source. So powerful. Van der Dussen. Rassie van der Dussen goes to a half century. And he's hit it straight to Williamson. Don't worry about that. It's the short boundary on that side. Man up there. Oh no! Spilt it. Ferguson. Oh yes. Oh yes. Top connection. Shot. South Africa end 241 for 6 from their 49.
In reply, Williamson took the game down to the wire as he smashed an unbeaten 106 off 138 balls. Medium pacer Chris Morris was the best South African bowler. He took figures of 3 for 49.
Just guilty of over-pitching here in Ngidi as he tries to go at the stumps. And Guptill isn't going to miss out on those.
Threads it through, and that is pure class from Kane Williamson. Miscue, and it falls safely for Guptill. Well, what's happened here? Well, he stood on his stumps. Martin Guptill cannot believe it. He gets deep into his crease, looking to pull that ball away. He's trodden on his stumps. Has he got a fine tickle on this? He has. Chris Morris strikes. Edged and gone. Chris Morris hit the wickets again. And South Africa are all over this.
Williamson, which is another 50 for New Zealand. It's in the gap. The 50 partnership comes up. There it is. There's a wicket. It's Morris again. Nisham gone.
And it does go through the leg side. Slap drag down onto it in a flash. Up and away, way back. That just missed Spada. That's about as close as it gets for Spada. Oh! Unfortunately, can't grab it. something. It's up and it's away again. The second 6 for de Grandhomme. Stevie now will have a runner if he hits, don't we? He doesn't hit. Chance after chance going begging. Good old stump. What a way to go to 50. That's a very fine innings. What you want from your big players. There's one out there. He should catch this. Oh, dear me. It splits them both. And it ends up hitting the boundary. Well, there's a man back to catch it. And catch it he does. Wicket number 1 of the 2 or 3 that are needed. Slow ball it is! 6 it is! Kane Williamson, under pressure, does the business. First World Cup 100, and what a time for him.
Well, heavy rain forced the abandonment of the opening T20 International of the 3-match series between England women and West Indies women at Wantage Road, Northampton, England on Tuesday. Now, no toss was possible as the weather kept players and officials off the field, and umpires Jeremy Lloyds and Rob Bailey eventually called time on the encounter, with conditions showing no signs of improving and the official cut-off time nearing. West Indies will hope for better weather when they face England in the second T20I scheduled for the same venue on Friday. The Caribbean side will be keen on a strong showing in the shortest format after suffering a 3-0 whitewash in the preceding one-day international series, which formed part of the ICC Women's Championship. And that's the sports. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Caribbean Newsline is brought to you by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc.
We had a little rain delay, huh? Yeah. We're going to go to the Kinetic River. Jeff, Corey, Jim, Marco. We're going to see what they think, what they do. Let's catch some fish.
This hat has yet to fail me with catching a decent fish. Stick with what works. I usually have a Madfish t-shirt on. I'm waiting for the Madfish underwear to come out. That's lights out. That's like a world record. Smallmouth, world record, largemouth, all in one day.
Madfish underwear? What the f are you talking about?
Again, the major developments of this day: Dominica's Prime Minister appeals to the region's private sector to pump money into struggling airline layout, and in sport, New Zealand secure a 4th wicket win over South Africa in the nail-biting ICC Cricket World Cup match. This Caribbean Newsline for news and sports round the clock. Subscribe to CaribNews.com. For more of our programming, log on to CaribVision.tv and check out our YouTube channel. We'll be back here again tomorrow, but from all of us at CMC News, thank you for watching. Have yourselves a good night.